Let me call to order the Board of Directors regular meeting for the Clean Energy Alliance for April 25th, 2024. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Garcia.
Here.
Board Member Becker.
Present.
Board Member Musgrove.
Here.
Chair Druker.
Here.
Noting Vice Chair Melendez and alternate Board Member Joyce are absent.
Okay, thank you very much. Ed, will you lead us?
I'm sorry, and Board Member Bob Patel is also absent.
Very good. Will you lead us in the pledge?
To the flag.
Do any board members have any announcements or comments?
I think I need to make my what do you call it? My it's not a revelation. It's a disclosure. Sorry, thank you.
What you did over the summer.
What? I'm going to make my book report today. So CEA was kind enough to pay for my hotel and my airline ticket to go to the Cal CCA conference up in San Jose. And there was about me and 750 other people. So it was really a very great networking experience. It just proved to me that there's 750 people out there that are excited and smart and are trying to help our state with their energy crisis. And so just wanted to disclose that.
Thank you, Christy. Unfortunately, I had a cold and terrible cold and couldn't show up. So I'm sure a fun time was had by all.
Yeah.
Okay, also want to announce that our Executive Director, CEO Greg Wade, is with us via Zoom today. Very good. Are there any members of the public that wish to make any comments at this point?
We do not have any public speakers at this time.
Okay, very good. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Has everybody read the minutes and set to approve them?
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll, Kaylin.
Yes, and I will also note that alternate Board Member Joyce arrived at 2:05 p.m. And now we will call the roll for the approval of the minutes. Board Member Garcia.
Aye.
Board Member Becker. Board Member Musgrove.
Aye.
Alternate Board Member Joyce.
Yes.
Chair Druker.
Yes. Okay, next we have the consent calendar. We have 3 items on the consent calendar. Kaylin, will you read the titles of the consent calendar, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Item 1, Clean Energy Alliance Treasurer's Report for February 2024. Item 2, consideration of a professional services agreement with Pacific Energy Advisors. Item number 3, consideration of a professional services agreement with NewGen.
Are there any items that anybody would like to remove from the consent calendar? Any items that anybody would like to add to the consent calendar? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Very good. Kaylin, will you please call the roll?
Board Member Becker.
Yes.
Board Member Garcia.
Yes.
Board Member Musgrove. Alternate Board Member Joyce.
Yes.
Chair Druker.
Yes. Okay, now we go on to Clean Energy Alliance Chief Executive Officer Operational Report. So Greg, out in the ether, you're up.
Yes, hello. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Chair Druker and members of the CEA Board. I do appreciate the flexibility in allowing me to be here virtually with you all, and I'm going to share my screen here and make the presentation. Can we all see that?
Yes, we can.
So just a high-level overview of the report I'm about to provide. We're going to provide an update on the presence of our staff at community events, the various presentations to community groups, both past and upcoming, and a high-level overview of the enrollment statistics for the two cities that launched this month, Vista and Oceanside. Here you have a list of outreach or community events that we have participated in dating back to March. We've been very active, and I want to compliment our staff in staffing these events and also getting a little bit of assistance from our Community Advisory Commission, who members have volunteered as well to attend these events. We've been active at the farmers markets in both Vista and Oceanside, as well as with both chambers of commerce. You can see there are a couple of events. We are also still engaging with our other member agencies, including the San Marcos Chamber of Commerce, having attended their spring fling. And moving on, the Progressive Labor Alliance. We were at the Earth Day event at the Vista Botanical Gardens last weekend. And recently this week, we had a virtual town hall for Vice Chair Melendez, which was a well-attended event, as well as participated in the Sony Electronics Earth Day Fair on Tuesday this week. Upcoming, we have tomorrow the Dr. Bronner's Staff Earth Day Extravaganza that we were asked to participate in. I should again remind the board and the community members watching this that Dr. Bronner, his company, has opted up to be a Green Impact Champion. They were a part of the virtual town hall event last Monday, so that was good to have them there as a steward for opting up other businesses to 100%. We also have the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce Green Business Expo this Saturday, and we'll be engaging with Vista staff, excuse me, the Vista Business Breakfast next week, Vista Farmers Market, and we'll also be engaging with the San Diego County Farm Bureau in their Graze at the Field events, as well as participating in a virtual town hall on the, May 10th for Councilmember O'Donnell. Oops. Then the following week we'll be at the Farmers Market at Vista, Hunter Industries Resource Fair, again, the Carlsbad Green Business Network Conference, Ocean Hills Country Club, Escondido Town Business Association, and the Vista Strawberry Festival. Here is the high-level statistics for our enrollments for Oceanside and Vista. I'm happy to say that we're doing quite well at this point. These statistics are up through April 10th, I believe. And the overall participation rate for Oceanside is at 97%, for Vista at 98.1%, for a total participation rate of 97.3%. So that's a good standing as of this moment. We do, as I remind you, have 2 more months. The 30-day notice after launch will go out in May, and then in June, the 60-day grace period will come to a close. So we'll continue to monitor these and update the board as necessary. Oops. Here's enrollment statistics for all our accounts. We have a total of 151,673 total accounts, including the cities of Vista and Oceanside. There you see that the default product is by far the highest enrollment. We do have 537 as at the end of March opted down to the 50%, and then 674 have opted up to the Green Impact. And that concludes the high-level overview of that enrollment and the activity so far in Vista and Oceanside and those upcoming. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Greg?
No, I just have a quick comment that I just want to really thank the staff and for their, these are daily. It looks like you guys are doing events daily. That's just really commendable. So thank you so much for getting the word out there and helping people understand what we do here, because it's really helpful. It's really noticeable on the opt-outs or the opt-ups. It's really doing a great service for us. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I too would like to echo those comments. All 6 members of our staff have been involved in each of at least parts of each of these events. We have taken turns and staffed them, and I'm very happy that we have such an engaged staff.
Other questions for Greg? Great, thank you very much, Greg. And I really appreciate the report and the stats. So are there any members of the public that wanted to comment on this?
We do not have any public speakers.
Very good. Next, we go to regulatory update. So we have a presentation by Keys and Fox.
Good afternoon, Chair Drucker, members of the board. My name is Jake Schlesinger. I'm a partner at Keys and Fox. I work closely with Tim Lindell to manage a lot of the PUC dockets that we intervene in on behalf of Clean Energy Alliance, often in conjunction with San Diego Community Power as well. Let me share my screen here. And I assume you can all hear me, correct? Because I can't see or hear you.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay, today I'm going to focus on some of the dockets that I manage, specifically A22-05-002, which is where the commission is considering income graduated fixed charges and general increases to fixed charges for the investor-owned utilities. I'm going to focus most of my time today on that topic. I'm also going to give you a quick update on SDG&E's Phase 2 rate case, which we're in the process of litigating right now. And I'll give you a very quick update on the provider of last resort rulemaking, just an update to what you heard at your last meeting from my colleague, Mr. Andy Ball. So diving right in to income graduated fixed charges and what's going on with fixed charges, all started with AB 205, which amended the Public Utilities Code in a number of ways. Most importantly, it removed the $10 fixed charge cap for the IOUs for default residential customers. And it really provided some pretty clear language to the commission that they should expand fixed charges, that the legislature didn't believe that that the commission was recovering enough, or I'm sorry, that the utilities were recovering enough of their fixed costs through fixed charges. And so it required the commission or allowed the commission to adopt new or expanded fixed charges and required the commission to consider these by July 1st, 2024 on an income graduated basis with different fixed costs for different customers. So the commission scoped this into its demand flexibility proceeding, A22-05-002, and took proposals and suggestions from the various parties. This kind of shows you the spread of where parties were at in terms of what level of fixed charges they recommended. To no one's surprise, the IOUs were proposing much larger fixed charges than what has historically been, with SDG&E proposing the highest fixed charge of $60 a month for a default residential customer. So that's about a 6,000% increase from the current fixed charges. And you can see on the opposite end, you have kind of the DER advocates and the solar advocates proposing more or less status quo, sticking around $10, with a lot of the consumer groups and environmental groups somewhere in the middle there, around $24 or so. So the commission issued a proposed decision just before Mr. Ball presented to you guys last time. The high level there is that the PD kind of took a middle ground on the amount of the fixed charge, establishing the $24.15 as the default residential charge. And they did that to be similar to SMUD, which it considered to be a reasonable comparison to the IOUs. But of course, there's 3 tiers here. So there's the discount for FARA and CARE customers down to $12 and $6 a month. But kind of more importantly, and maybe more to the point, a lot of what the commission decided in this proceeding was what can properly be recovered through a fixed charge, what is definitely a fixed cost and what maybe isn't. And so I put together this chart for you, and the parentheticals that have the party names afterwards, that just indicates which party was advocating that each of these cost items should be included as part of the fixed charge. Some of these made it in, some of them didn't, but these are the parties that wanted to put them in. So I'm just going to talk through these a little bit. What's in the fixed charge? What can be recovered from the fixed charge? The basic thing is marginal customer access costs. That is very traditional. That is typically what we see in fixed utility costs. That's basically metering and connecting to the grid. What's new here are these three other bullet points. So the power purpose charges for energy efficiency and low income programming are now, some of those costs are now going to be recovered through the fixed fee. The nuclear decommissioning non-bypassable charges as well. And then the only generation related cost that's making its way into the fixed charge is the cost allocation mechanism, or the CAM as we refer to it. And that is to recover costs for generation capacity. But in this case, it's generation capacity that also gets allocated to CCAs. So CCAs get some RA credit for that CAM resources. What's not included in the fixed charge is everything on the right there. Most importantly for you is the PCIA. The PCIA, Turn and NRDC had been advocating that PCIA charges, which are currently volumetric kilowatt hour charges, should be recovered in the fixed fee. Cal CCA fought that in its advocacy in this proceeding, and on the proposed decision at least has won the day on that. A few other things in here, but I guess I'll just point out the most controversial still in this proceeding are the non-marginal distribution costs. So that's basically all of the distribution costs that are embedded that aren't a result of adding new customers to the system. And comments have been filed on this proposed decision over the course of the last couple of weeks, and this is still the most hotly contested issue. With the utilities, Cal advocates, and some of the environmental groups continuing to push to have these non-marginal distribution costs. And that, I will say, would be quite different in my experience from what most commissions allow. Most commissions would not include non-marginal distribution costs. And so I guess in that, that is sort of, I guess, how I see this decision as being pretty middle ground, in that it didn't go so far as to make that change. So meat of the matter, how does it impact CCAs? How does it impact CEA? In terms of rates, I think the good news is not too much. The ERA will remain volumetric for the IOUs. That means that CCA generation charges will still be matching the same levels of utility generation commodity costs. The exception on the generation side, like I said, everything else in the fixed charge is already distribution related. The CAM is the exception to that, but because CCAs already pay the CAM in a way that's identical to, because unbundled customers pay the CAM in a way that's identical to bundled customers, moving it into a new identical cost recovery mechanism, in this case, the fixed charge, doesn't really change things from a competitive landscape. And then, of course, the CPUC rejected proposals to include PCIA and fixed charges. So from a rates perspective, I don't see a big impact here. I think the big impact is policy, both at the state level and potentially down at the CEA or CCA level. Increasing cost recovery through through fixed charges and decreasing cost recovery through volumetric rates means that bills are less sensitive to customer usage. And so customers don't have as much incentive to conserve, all else being equal. And at least under the theory of this decision may have more incentive to electrify. And so, given that CCAs and CEA in particular run programs both to electrify loads as well as to increase energy efficiency and distributed generation, there will be some competing impacts on those programs potentially. However, the impacts are relatively small, I think, compared to what we could have seen. Like I said, proposals of a $60 fixed charge did not get adopted. We're in the $24 range, still a lot above $10, but not as bad as it could be. This shows you SDG&E's new volumetric charges. So if you just take a residential summer on-peak rate of 85 cents, once they move some of the distribution-related costs into the fixed charge, that'll be 78 cents. So it's about a 7 cents difference across the board. But given that the rates are so high, already in the 50 to 60 cent range, it's not as huge of an impact as it might be otherwise. So next steps contemplated in the proposed decision would be that the utilities file implementation advice letters. San Diego Gas and Electric would be expected to implement its new fixed fee of $24.15 as the default, but sometime between October and December of next year. However, again, this is a proposed decision. There's comments being taken or that have already been provided actually at this point, and the commission could modify this before it votes on it. That is all I have on fixed charges. Like I said, I do have 2 other quick updates, but I thought I might pause there in case there are questions.
Yeah. Questions? Yeah. Yeah, appreciate the work on this. Go ahead.
Okay. Great. So next, just a really quick update on San Diego Gas and Electric's Phase 2 rate case. In this case, we're arguing on behalf of Clean Energy Alliance and SDCP for a few changes to rate design. First, pertaining to the PCIA and how that's presented to, and how it's recovered from bundled customers. Currently, the bundled customers pay the PCIA the same as unbundled customers. They pay the current year vintage of the PCIA. However, those costs are just embedded in their general generation rates. And so they don't see it as a broken out line item the way that a CCA customer does. And so we're proposing some changes that would make that charge look the same for both bundled and unbundled customers, both in the tariffs and on customer bills. And then sort of a similar issue, we're also looking at how the CARE and FARA discounts are provided to customers. There is some confusion from a lot of customers about whether they're getting the CARE discount when they move to CCA territory. And so we are proposing some changes to clarify that as well. We do expect these issues to be litigated. We just had a status conference actually this morning in this proceeding before the ALJ. It was shared that SDG&E is going to settle the majority of the issues in this proceeding with the other parties. They did inform us over a month ago that they would not be pursuing a settlement agreement with us on our issues. So we will have to take those to the commission. And I do expect them to argue that some of these issues are out of scope. They did mention that to the ALJ this morning. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. Anything on GRC2 before I hit my last topic?
Any questions? Go ahead.
Okay, and then finally, provider of last resort rulemaking. This is actually a proceeding that I don't manage, so I'm just giving you an update from Andy here that he passed along to his summary from last week. The proposed decision was voted on and adopted by the commission. However, there were a few modifications, some good, some bad, I think from the CCA perspective. First, it did get rid of that duplicate submission of audited financials that Andy talked to you guys about last week. Now you only need to submit audited financials once a year. So a little bit less bureaucracy there. I guess the not so great news is that they did expand the tier 2 triggers for what would trigger reporting requirements for CCAs. It had previously said that a CCA that was insolvent or bankrupt had to submit to these reporting requirements. Now it's a reasonable expectation that the CCA will become insolvent or bankrupt. So a looser standard there. And also a modification to adopt a proposal from, I think it was Cal Advocates, but don't quote me on that, to remove the presumption that the CCA financial data would be deemed confidential from the get-go. So instead, when that information is submitted, the CCA would have to follow the same confidentiality processes that the utilities file when they seek confidential information. So those are the changes to the Polar PD. And that is all I have for my update, but happy to take any questions.
Questions for Jake? My understanding, Jake, is that we still have to have a letter of credit of like $147,000, and that has not changed. Is that correct? I think Andy can answer that also.
I might need to get back to you on that. Like I said, I'm not day-to-day involved in this proceeding, so that sounds right to me based on what I heard from listening to your meeting last week, but I would prefer that we follow up.
Yeah, and I can, if I could, I can, if Andy wants to weigh in, our understanding at this point, having done the calculation, is that the minimum charge or FSR financial requirement would be 147,000, and that ours would not change and would remain at that minimum.
And that would be a letter of credit, not an actual cash amount.
Correct.
Very good.
Actually, right now, we have $147,000 deposited at River City Bank in support of a letter of credit or collateral posted. And the way the calculation works, it's quite complex. It's based on RA prices and projected rates and projected energy costs. But the most recent calculation indicates that we're still going to be at 147,000 for the foreseeable future. However, if energy prices or rates or anything change dramatically, that could change.
And I can confirm that there was nothing in the revisions to the PD that changed that analysis.
Very good. Any other questions for Jake? Okay. Any public comment?
We do not have any public comment, but I will note for the record that Vice Chair Melendez arrived at 2:20 p.m.
Great, thank you. So Jake, thank you for the report. Keep up the great work. So next we have a financial review year-to-date and forecasting through June 2024. Andy, I assume you're up, right?
That's correct. And I'll wait till the presentation's up. And while we're waiting, I just want to let you know that this is my first time in person at the board meeting. So I've been on Zoom until now.
Thank you for showing up.
Okay, for this, we have not had a financial review in a while, so you have seen monthly financial reports, and the one you approved it earlier in this meeting is through February. The March report is due any moment, but we don't have it yet. So I will talk about first actual performance through February 2024. and then provide a forecast through the rest of the fiscal year, which is another 4 months. I'll provide some details about revenues and expenses, and then also provide an update on the JP Morgan credit line compliance. It's related to our credit line. And then at our next meeting or your next meeting, we will review a draft budget for the FY 24-25 period, as well as a 5-year outlook. And you'll get a chance to review and comment, and then hopefully approve the final budget at the June meeting. This is a summary through February 29th that should match the financials you approved earlier. Total operating revenues year to date through February 29th were 134 million. Energy costs were 121 million. Other operating costs were 3.5 million. And that led, and then total non-operating income and expense is 697,000, most of which is interest expense. That led to a change in that position at 229 of $8 million positive. And just as an FYI, that leads to, we had cash, total cash outstanding of 6.5 million, almost 6.5 million. And we had utilized $5 million of our then $25 million credit line at that point. This is a forecast of the full year, which is the remaining 4 months. So we expect revenues to be about little over 200 million. And then I'll drop down to the change in that position. We expect change in that position to fall from the current 8.1 million at February 29th to about 1.3 million. So still positive for the year, but not less positive than it was at February 29th. That is normal for a year. We typically would have more positive results in the summer period when rates are much higher and usage is much higher, and typically we'll have lower and sometimes often negative results in the springtime. It's very common expected for CEA and also very common for most CCAs. But we still are expecting to be positive for the year. We expect cash to be at a little under 3.5 million, and the total line of credit used to reach the maximum that we will get to is about 25 million. At this point, the credit line maximum has been increased to 40 million. That happened at the last board meeting. So we do not expect to draw down the full 40 million, or in fact, at this point, we expect 25 million to be the maximum. If you may recall, last June, cash is typically the lowest point at the end of June until the summer rates kick in and the collection for summer usage starts to increase, and then we start to repay the amount of the credit line. In fact, our expectation is that we will fully pay off the $25 million credit line by August and maybe September, but at least through by the middle of September. Keep going. We expect for the year, for the revenues, I'll show a summary in a minute, but we expect revenues to be approximately 12% below the budgeted level. That will equate to about a $28.2 million shortfall for the year in terms of budgeting. Actual loads across the state have been 3% lower, mostly due to much softer usage and lower usage across the state. We had a cooler than average summer last summer, so therefore that contributes to lower usage. But the bigger piece was that our budget was higher, was predicted to be higher than it should have been. At this point, we believe that the data we had for the 2 expansions for Encinitas, San Marcos, and Oceanside Vista, the data we had from SDG&E was overstated. And we therefore predicted and budgeted for a much higher usage than we have seen for the year. Our current full year 2024, FY 2024 ending in June, load forecast is approximately 12% lower than the original budget forecast, which is pretty much in line with our revenue shortfall. Expenses, along with that revenue shortfall and lower load, we would have expected our expenses to be substantially lower. Although they will be lower, they won't be as much, as low as the revenue shortfall. Resource adequacy prices are significantly higher than had been budgeted, and I'll talk about that more in the next couple of slides. And renewable costs are also significantly higher. This is a picture, which is a little bit hard to read, but I'll try to walk you through it, of CAISO energy prices. So what's happened with prices? The orange or greenish one is a year ago. Blue is last summer. And then I'll just move to the red one, which is the most current forecast of energy prices. So they're all looking out about through June of 2025. And if you see that the cost of energy in the CAISO has dropped 18% from what it was a year ago. You may have heard about prices that's generally resulted from lower natural gas prices in the last 4 months to 6 months. In fact, very, very low relative to the last number of years. However, even though energy prices are substantially lower, we haven't benefited really from that because for conservatism, we have a policy and practice where we consistently buy hedges in advance, where we locked in those prices about a year ago. Were then higher prices, so we haven't really benefited from those lower energy prices in this period. Assuming that energy prices stay low, then we have a practice of continuing to buy hedges on a regular, ongoing, rolling basis, usually at every quarterly basis, and we will benefit from those lower prices as we go forward. Two other areas that have contributed to very significantly higher energy prices, resource adequacy. This is a similar look where you can see that in January of last year, then July of last year, and then the current prices, in blue, resource adequacy prices for the summer months have skyrocketed. They were in the $20 to $30 range about a year ago, and are now in the $80 a megawatt price now. Those have contributed to significant cost increases, typically, especially in the high summer months. We expect to get some possible relief in a couple of years from now, but that remains to be seen. Most CCAs are suffering from significant prices. We have mitigated some of this cost increase that you see in the marketplace because these are market prices. We have mitigated a lot of this cost increases because we have been paying some penalties in the high summer months. This board has approved some of those penalties, and the penalties have been substantially less than these $80 megawatt prices. So we paid in the less than $10 a megawatt price for some of those, however, still higher than we had originally anticipated.
Yeah, Andy, when we talked about that last year, there was some concern that maybe CalISO would look at that and say that's a free ride and increase those, call them fines, if you will. Is that something we see on the horizon?
Well, the way the penalties work, and I'm not an expert at it, I'll do my best, and then Kirby's here to correct me if I don't do it right. The way the penalties work is that the first set of penalties are at roughly $8.88 a megawatt. As you increase, as you have periods, other months where you don't meet the penalties, then those penalties actually increase to a maximum of 3 times that. So, well, a little more than 3 times. So about $30 to $35 a megawatt, which is still substantially less than the $80 range that we've seen and are seeing. In fact, we're seeing prices upwards of $100 in some summer months. We expect at this point, there's no rule that those penalties would increase beyond the $30 to $35 range. It's possible that the CPUC could change the rules at some point, but we don't see that on the horizon, and it's not in the current set of dockets for them to do it. We are not alone as a CCA in taking these penalties because of these really just out of control markets at this point. So we don't expect that to happen. We are making every effort to comply with meeting, even if the prices are higher than the penalties, we're making every effort to comply with other months, other than the July, August, and September timeframe when the prices have really gotten out of control. You can see other months are more than, some months are more than the 888 penalty. However, we've done our best to comply with the obligations, regulatory obligations in those months, even when the prices have been, but they just been very onerous. And some of the vendors that sell these have also, on top of the hard charging very high prices, are also have also created really onerous collateral requirements where we'd have to pay sometimes a year in advance for something that for these onerous prices. So we just have not been able to afford to do that. I don't know if does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sounds like we're still ahead of the game in spite of the fines coming through.
Yeah, we don't really want to be in the non-compliance, but as I said, we're not alone, and it's just, the prices are out of control at this point. Kirby, anything you'd like to add? Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kirby Dussel with Pacific Energy Advisors. And as Andy mentioned, the resource adequacy really market in California is broken. I think that's just a fair assessment of things. There are a number of contributing factors to what we're seeing here in terms of the price trajectory over time. Really during and on the heels of the pandemic, there were a number of supply chain disruptions and various other peculiarities that took some of the projects that were supposed to be online already and pushed those initial delivery dates well into the future. And in some cases, those projects are still going through the development process and have yet to achieve commercial operation. So there's really a shortage of capacity as a result of those delays. And then you couple that with some of the policy changes that the state has implemented over time, notably that the renewable assets that have been built out to help the state meet its renewable energy procurement objectives, those capacity values have been cut based on the regulators and the system operator understanding that those particular assets provide less reliability benefits than they originally assumed. So for example, you could have a 100 megawatt solar array that only gets, a handful of megawatts of resource adequacy credit. And there's really no compensation provided for that most of the time in terms of the contractual arrangements. So that's an unfortunate outcome as well. And then kind of tripling up on the situation, if you will, there are a number of other environmental policy objectives that are intended to take offline some of the coastal generating assets that use fossil fuels and also then seawater to cool those facilities. So I think we've got a confluence of issues here that have really exacerbated a lot of the problems that we're seeing and certainly have pushed prices up to levels we simply haven't seen ever. When I first got into the industry 25 years ago, resource adequacy was about $2 a kilowatt month. And so now we're seeing it in the summer trading near $120 a kilowatt. So I know a lot of things have gone up in terms of prices, but this is a little absurd.
Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think the answer is yes. It's a little tough to say because we are relying on development projects to come to fruition. And then also, I think a fair assessment of where we are in terms of these other competing environmental objectives where we're trying to kind of take down some of these resources that are less desirable within the California fleet. But there are a number of different generating assets and battery storage assets that are supposed to be coming online in the 2026 to 2027 timeframe. The state has issued a series of different procurement directives that were intended to build out additional reliability assets on the grid. And Clean Energy Alliance is responsible for a small share of those procurement initiatives. And as those initiatives move forward in time and due dates come to pass for those projects being brought online, we expect that there will be additional capacity and some relief on the price side.
I was just going to ask the exact same question. Like, please give us something to look forward to.
Yeah, it's also been interesting because, you know, we have this situation. You can see there the second bullet on this slide that refers to the slice of day framework. So right now, not to bore you too much with the details, but this is directly relevant to what we're seeing in terms of the pricing here. The state of California decided to move from its current resource adequacy compliance framework, which is really a monthly assessment of your reserve capacity procurement obligation relative to your peak demand, and move that to an hourly assessment, which is this slice of day framework. And 2024 is what we're calling a test year for this framework. 2025 is when this particular program is supposed to go live. So there are a lot of asset owners and capacity holders that are waiting to see how the final details of this particular program come together before they re-enter the market. So we believe that this is, in some cases, kind of a falsely constrained supply situation. And it could be the case that once the final details of this program are addressed, that there will be some additional supply made available to the market, and hopefully some relief on the price side. But that's a bit of speculation. We'll just have to see how that all comes together at the end of the day, because again, the final details of this framework have yet to be released.
Could I also ask, what is the slice of day solving for? What is the purpose behind that change?
Yeah, there are a number of different reasons for this. And I think as the composition of resources on the grid has changed, particularly the extreme additions of renewable generating assets, as well as the more recent additions of battery storage assets, I think what the regulators are intending to do is come up with a more accurate assessment of when capacity assets are actually available and when they can provide reliability resources, and when those needs actually occur based on the unique usage patterns of different load serving entities on the grid. So it's really just trying to more closely and accurately align how it is that our generating fleet performs with the reliability needs of the state. That's the attempt. The monthly framework that currently exists is a little cruder.
Okay. And that, I guess the monthly framework is more about, I won't even pause that. Never mind. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, another piece of the energy expense area that's also a bit out of control is also clean energy prices. There's been as our needs for clean energy increase, that's similar to a lot of other CCAs, and a lot of pressure on the marketplace for lots of CCAs, and the state mandates to increase energy or clean energy purchases. But the price of clean energy has also gone up by significant. So back a year ago, PCC1, which is the primary new renewable energy that we would buy, was $20, roughly $20 a megawatt hour, and now it's upwards of $70, $75. And large hydro, which is a use of which is renewable energy, but not in the case of California, but it is renewable energy, was about $5 a megawatt hour last year, and is now upwards of what is that, $30 a megawatt hour. So the prices have also, along with RA, has renewable energy has also gone up significantly. The result of those two and energy prices is that overall our energy expenses, because of load, are expected to be $8.2 million less than budget. even though our revenues were expected to be $28 million, if you recall. Our other expenses, which we were somewhat conservative on, are expected to be $4 million below budget. Our interest expense is expected to be above budget, but the net is that our total expenses are expected to be 12 million less than budget, but not enough to make up for the whole $28.2 million shortfall in revenues. And that's summarized on this next slide. If looking across the top, I'll spend a little bit more time. Our total operating revenues were forecasted $200 million. We had a budget of $228 million, was therefore we expect to be, with the first red circle, $28 million short. Our total cost of energy was budgeted at $200 million. We expect to be $8 million favorable. That's those column on the third right is variance, favorable or unfavorable, so $8 million less. Our other expenses, excluding energy, is expected to be $4 million. And therefore, our total operating expenses expected to be about $12 million less than budget. However, given that our revenues are expected to be so short, our change in that position is forecasted, the left circle of 1.3 million relative to a budgeted change in that position of 17 million. So we expect to be $16 million short of that. But again, still positive for the year. Our last year, we were not positive. So we are still forecasting an expected level of positive. But although we are expecting at this point, and there are still 4 months left of financials, we expect to end the year with a negative net position, although with plenty of cash and cash capacity given our credit lines, which is my next slide. But I'll pause there for a second if there are any questions before I talk about our capacity.
Yeah, thank you. How does this compare to the conventional energy uses like that we would be seeing at SDG&E? I mean, are their prices going up as well? What's their budget look like? I mean, can I get a gauge of that to see how we're comparing to them?
Yeah, we haven't looked at their financials, and I'm not sure that we'd compare with them. They're in a very different place, especially because, for example, RA, which is one of the most significant contributors and cost increases that we've seen, they don't have that cost. In fact, they have excess RA capacity that they sell into the marketplace for very big profits. They've sold us some, but not as much as we would like. And again, when they sell it, they make huge profits, and therefore they're probably making money, although we haven't tracked their financials. We don't really compare ourselves from a financial standpoint to them. Our financials do somewhat compare, although they're much smaller, to SDCP's. Because they have suffered some of the same cost impacts. Relative to other CCAs, especially in Northern California, where PG&E is the IOU, a lot of the CCAs there are actually making significant amounts of money because PG&E's rates are so much higher than SDG&E's rates. And when the CCAs rates are tied to the PG&E's rates, they're allowed to be much higher for the same usage that we are charging. So we're comparing our rates to SDG&E's, which are in our minds artificially suppressed, and therefore we have low rates and high costs, and are then as a result getting squeezed. But on top of exacerbated by the fact that our load budget was so much higher than we really achieved. And the downside of that load budget, the budgeted load at the beginning of the year that was informed by data that SDG&E provided us, which we've now learned was higher than it should have been. Can't say that they did it purposely or not, but it was certainly higher than it should have been. That informed us to buy energy at hedges at higher prices, and therefore we're sort of suffering the worst parts of all of this. Now, we expect all of that to improve in the coming months, but at the moment and the last year, we're suffering from some of all those perfect storm stuff. I don't know if that helped at all.
Yeah, it cleared up some things, but you mentioned, and maybe you did talk about it, but I want to some clarification. You mentioned that SDG&E's prices are artificially suppressed. Can you expand on that real quick?
I can't do, that was an editorial comment that I shouldn't, that's not, we don't have any facts about that. We don't know about that. It seems like they're certainly lower than other IOUs, which leads us to wonder how they were derived. However, rates are presented to the CPUC, and they go through theoretically the same level of scrutiny that other IOUs do, but we wonder how they're able to do that given the rates are so much lower than other IOUs.
If I could intercede here, I appreciate it. I think Andy touched a little bit on this, is that keep in mind that SDG&E's load has dramatically decreased. So they're no longer providing generation for the huge number of customers they have been in the past. So that's one thing. So they have the ability to pass along that cost. And they're also, their renewable energy target is at about in the low 40%, where our renewable energy targets are much higher than that at 50% up to 7. Our default product is 75% GHG free. So those are challenges for us. And while we're expanding, we're also having to procure that energy in advance for those additional customers we're bringing on, whereas SDG&E's customer load is decreasing substantially.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that information. Appreciate it.
I just wanted to give you just a quick review of the timeline. We will come back to this board with a draft budget on May 30th. We will be meeting with the chair and vice chair on May 16th to go through a initial review of that before we come to the board and take comments, and then with the expectation of getting final budget approval on the June 27th meeting.
Greg, do you have any other further comment on this?
Thank you, Chair Drucker. I do not, but we are available to answer any questions. I would also like to thank both Andy Stern and Kirby Dussel for being available today, especially in my absence. I think it was very helpful, and it's good to have them both with us. Thanks.
Are there any public speakers on this?
No, we do not have any speakers.
Any further questions any comments?
We
Go
just
ahead,
need
please.
to all pray for a very, very hot summer and for Vista and Oceanside to use lots of energy.
That unfortunately the summer is in the next fiscal year.
Oh, it's
So
not
it
this
doesn't
summer.
quite work.
Uh,
Andy, one thing on your presentation, it said Encinitas, it was Escondido.
I'm sorry, say
Oh, yeah.
again?
Yeah, on your presentation, you mentioned Encinitas, San Marcos.
Oh,
It should have been Escondido, San Marcos.
I apologize for that. I'm not a Southern California person, so I apologize.
We'll get you a map. So I remember last year we talked about this whole thing with the RA and some of the shortfalls we were experiencing. And it was my understanding that the CCAs were going to all the acronyms, the CPUC, to try and leverage some of those longer term contracts that were purchased at a lower rate that were being held by the three primaries to maximize their dividend and for their investors. But it doesn't seem like that's working for us when it was the IOUs and the state initiated the CCA process, but we don't seem to be getting a lot of support for our end users to keep the rates down. It's very discouraging when the bills come in and they're higher than what SDG&Es are, and allowing for the editorial comment. It's still a matter of the financials and the bottom line.
If I may, on that point, it is interesting to consider that the PUC created a framework that allows for newer load serving entities like Clean Energy Alliance to purchase renewable energy from the incumbent utility, both over short and long-term durations. But they're not able to do the same thing with reserve capacity. That was kind of set aside and left to the investor-owned utilities to deal with. So I think that phenomenon has been concerning, and it's definitely something that continues to be probed by Cal CCA and various CCAs individually. So see what happens. But reliability seems to be an issue that's routinely set aside, and it's a little tough too, because you look back at the summer of 2023 and it was relatively mild throughout the state, and yet the reliability framework that we have is really based on purchases in advance. So there's no relief on a cost basis, in spite of the fact that we probably had more resources than we actually need. And I understand reliability and insurance are kind of analogous to one another, and oftentimes you pay for insurance and hope you don't need it. But it's a little bit crude in terms of the way that the program's administered, and it certainly can have the effect of having some costs that are incurred that may not.
The look on Andy's face says it all. Thank you.
Greg, could you, we did have our quarterly meeting with San Diego Gas and Electric, and we did talk a little bit about RA. Could you give us an update on that also?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Drucker. So we did meet on Monday with the executive team, and part of that discussion was about resource adequacy being made available. It was discussed a little bit earlier about the MCAM allocation. We have resolved that issue, and we will receive about 10.5% of the available RA through that process. Us, SDCP, as well as SDG&E. And we did make clear that we are interested in procuring some of their reserve capacity on a go-forward basis, primarily as it pertains to the channel side account, the desalination plant. So we are in active discussions with the procurement staff of SDG&E. They are aware of what our needs are, and we are hoping to advance those discussions as we move forward. So it is a bit of a challenge, but it is something that at a staff level we are continuing to pursue to free up some of that reserve capacity.
Thank you. Other comments or? So, Andy, appreciate the report here. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to predict energy markets into the future, which is extremely difficult and makes our jobs a little bit harder. The other thing is we don't have the ability to predict the weather. And again, that makes our job harder. When the weather gets warmer, we want to have the power to make sure that we provide everybody with the ability to turn their lights on, air conditioning, et cetera. So the question comes down for all of us, how do we balance that? And that's, part of the reason why we exist is because instead of giving it to a private company, we as elected officials can have a little bit more input into how that should be handled. So, we have an excellent technical staff here. They're doing, I believe, the best they can to make sure that we are providing energy at a low cost on the one hand, and also providing us energy that is clean, carbon-free, et cetera. So we're going to have, there's some difficult decisions we're going to have to make over this next budget. And, I would ask that all of us be prepared to engage with staff to make sure that we make the correct decisions. So with that, are there any requests for future agenda items? Very good. Then our next meeting is going to be May 30th here at 2 p.m. and we're adjourned.